Welcome into this episode of Keon Sports, the Keon Sports Podcast. Our guest tonight, wrestling legend, announcer, premier, Ken Resnick. You remember him from the AWA, the WWF, then years later, the AWF. We're going to talk about all of it today, so sit tight, put your feet up, and grab something cold to drink. Up now is Ken Resnick. On the hotline now with Keon Sports is Ken Resnick. Ken, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Vince. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, absolutely. So I wanted to ask, I know you're residing in Minnesota now, but where did you grow up, and what sports figures did you follow growing up? Who were some of your favorite teams and players?
I actually grew up right in Minneapolis. So my favorite teams, the first pro teams that came here, Minnesota Twins and the Minnesota Vikings. In fact, Vince, the first job I ever had, I was 15 years old, and I sold hot dogs at the old Mets Stadium where the Twins and Vikings played. And I was extremely lucky that when I was about 11 years old, I had the chance to meet Harmon Killebrew. And through a mutual friend, a family friend who was a good friend of Harmon's, we kind of stayed in touch. So he was really one of my first, sports idols, sports heroes. In fact, the first time I met him, he told me that his son's name was Ken. So we had a little bit of a connection, but the Twins and Vikings were my first real, teams that I followed. And probably along with Harmon growing up, Johnny Unitas, Mickey Mantle, and Muhammad Ali. And I was lucky enough throughout my career I was able to meet all of them. So those were really my sports heroes, I guess.
That's pretty unique. A lot of times we don't always get that chance. I know I've been blessed to work with Jim Thome, who here in Northeast Ohio and Cleveland was one of my favorite baseball players. Wrote a book where he and Kenny Lofton actually did the forwards for it. So that was pretty neat. I know in basketball, one of my all-time favorites was a guy named Mark Price, and got to meet him as well. So yeah, every now and then that comes about where you get to have that, which is really cool. And I just want to throw this out there for the fans out there. Look back at it, but in the 70s, the Vikings were actually one of the best teams in football. I have to double check here, but I'm almost positive they went to 4 Super Bowls. They didn't win any, but they made it there 4 times. I'm correct on that, right? 4 times they made it, but came up short.
Yep, 0 for 4. In fact, I had a lot of friends that played on the teams in the 70s. And I went to the Super Bowl that was in New Orleans, but before the Superdome that was at Tulane Stadium against the Raiders. Mm-hmm. The day before the Super Bowl, we were celebrating in the French Quarter. It was about 78 degrees, and the next day at the Super Bowl, and that's how everybody had packed. The Super Bowl was cold, rainy, and about 38 degrees. It was one of the coldest games I was ever at because I didn't have any warm clothes.
Oh yeah, it's funny now we see it in domes and these beautiful stadiums, but back then it was not always the case. I remember there was a stretch there where they lost to Larry Zonka and the Dolphins one of the first years in the Super Bowl. Next year came back and had to lose to Franco Harris and the Steelers. So yeah, those Vikings teams didn't exactly have it easy once they got to the big dance. But
the first Super Bowl they lost was to the Hank Stram, Len Dawson, and the Kansas City Chiefs. Yep. And then they spread the wealth around. They lost to the Steelers, the Dolphins, and the Raiders.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you this then. We've had a ton of wrestlers on the show, a ton of personalities on the show, and it's astounding to me. Unfortunately, some of these guys are dead now, but it's astounding to me to look at it. Mr. Perfect, Rick Rude, let's see here, Joe. I just had him on the show last week. I'm drawing a blank here, but so many different guys from Minneapolis. Oh, Nikita Koloff, I'm sorry. We spoke with Nikita last week. So many different guys from the Minneapolis, Minnesota era, specifically Robbinsdale, Minnesota, got into professional wrestling. How did you get into professional wrestling? I'm just curious. Is it something about this area of the country?
Well, in terms of all the wrestlers, the AWA was so prominent here, and Vern Gagne went to, high school, I think it may have been Robbinsdale, here in the Twin Cities, lived in Mound, Minnesota, had his training camp here, so it was really a prime focus in this area. And, it was almost like the best analogy now, Vince, you see so many, players in Major League Baseball coming from the Dominican Republic because baseball was so big in the Dominican Republic. That's what pro wrestling was here in the Twin Cities. So you had a lot of young guys that watched it. Thanksgiving night, Christmas night was just kind of the fabric of the Twin Cities. It shows at the St. Paul Civic Center that aspired to be wrestlers, and then with Vern's school right here, it just worked out. And as far as how I got into wrestling, I was the sports director at the NBC affiliate in Rochester, Minnesota. And here in the Twin Cities at that time, they had a huge celebrity golf and tennis tournament called Duff's. It was started by a bar owner and very civic-minded individual by the name of Joe Duffy. But when I say it was a huge celebrity tournament, they had the cast of MASH in one year. They had the cast of Hill Street Blues, Lonnie Anderson, James Garner, then Vice President Gerald Ford. It was big time, where they would sometimes draw 40, 50,000 spectators. And I got the opportunity. They did something called Celebrity Corner, which was basically a stage that was set up with a loudspeaker system, and they had me interview a lot of the celebrities as they came through, because that was really the one chance that the crowds could have a chance to interact with them. Hopefully I would kind of ask the questions that the crowd was wondering. And one of the people I happened to interview was Vern Gagne. And, I was not a huge wrestling fan, but very familiar with All-Star Wrestling. So I was able to, ask him some poignant and on-topic questions. And then that night at the, dinner for the celebrities, the committee people, the VIPs, Vern came up and engaged me in a conversation, wanted to know who I was, where I worked, and I told him all that and had a nice talk, and that was it. And then about 2 weeks later, he called the television station in Rochester, got a hold of me, and wanted to know when I was going to be back in the Twin Cities, and I said I come up every weekend. I spend every weekend, and the following Saturday he arranged, and we had lunch, and we talked, and he offered me the job to come work for the AWA. So it was truly being in the right place at the right time.
That happens so often, too. It really does. When you get that first big break, it just happens to be right place, right time sometimes, when talent meets luck. Who, in your stretch there from about 83 to 86, who were some of the most talented performers that you worked with in the AWA? In the ring, calling the matches, but also interviewing and just being around them. Who do you say maybe some of the top 3 or 4 people that you're around? Because that was a time there where there began to be that exodus where people were leaving for WWF.
Yeah, Hulk was there when I was there. In fact, it was Hulk that gave me the nickname Killer Ken. So Hulk, Bobby Heenan, Nick Bockwinkel, Mad Dog Vachon, The Crusher, Larry Zbyszko was there. Andre came through, was there a couple couple months, kind of worked the battle royals around the territory. So it was some of the biggest names in wrestling. And, I was so fortunate that besides the television, I worked full-time in the office. And Blackjack Lanza was working in the office. So we really became, good friends. And I think Jack kind of passed the word amongst the boys that, I was okay and was a good guy. So, here I was lucky enough to be able to learn the business, from a Bobby Heenan, a Bockwinkel, Crusher, Mad Dog, Lanza. I mean, and we would still, besides the big towns, they would run a lot of towns, just in the upper Midwest where we would drive. So, I would get to spend hours in the car with these guys and just listening and learning, and could ask questions and learn about the philosophy and how they put together matches and things. I mean, it was amazing.
Now, could you tell in that brief stretch there, again, 3 or 4 years, right around 83 through 86, it just happened to be the exact time that Vince McMahon and the WWF at the time began to expand, buy out territories, and really kind of monopolize the entire wrestling world for themselves. While you were with the AWA, could you sense in a way that maybe Vern was falling a little bit behind the times as McMahon was going for more like a Hollywood rock and wrestling type thing, where, Vern Gagne stuck to the nuts and bolts of pro wrestling?
Oh, there was, no question. And it was pretty easy to see at the time, Vince, that Vince McMahon had realized the revenue that could be generated from television, from advertising, from secondary marketing, where that kind of became the WWF focus in terms of launching national, where while Vern had an amazing territory, amazing talent, he still looked at television as basically an infomercial for trying to sell tickets for the house shows. So I think that was pretty easy to see that, Vince McMahon was kind of looking towards the future, while Vern was, I don't want to say stuck in the past, but still believed in the current format of the AWA, and was also a little bit reticent to kind of share secondary marketing revenues, T-shirts and hats and things like that with the guys, because in Vern's mind, without him, they wouldn't be anybody or be able to, have people want to own shirts or hats. And he felt that should be his revenue. So yeah, you could see it coming. And, even back then, if you think about it, Vince's TV was being done every 3 to 4 weeks in Poughkeepsie, New York, but at an arena-style venue where Vern was still doing the studio matches. You might get 75 people, in the television studio. So that the look, the philosophy just began to be, 180 degrees difference.
So eventually, you decide to leave the AWA and go to the WWF. There is a great story that I've heard you tell in the past, and I'll let you try to tell it again. What exactly was the interview with Vince McMahon like? Did he put you on the spot right away, and did he really make you shave your mustache?
Yes, yes to all of those. And you know, to clear it up, I made the decision to leave the AWA. Interestingly enough, the Wrestle Rock was my last appearance in the AWA, and the Wrestle Rock Rumble video just will not die. But there had been no communication between me and Vince McMahon or anybody with the WWF about coming to work there. And then the week after Wrestle Rock, when word got out that I had left, they arranged to bring me out to New York. I flew out, and the way the interview process worked, not in any particular order, but I met with Terry Garvin for a while. I met with George Scott, you know, the head booker, for a while. I met with Pat Patterson, you know, some of the senior, Arnie Skolin, the senior WWF officials, and I think they kind of communicated amongst themselves and to Vince that, hey, you know, we think this guy is, you know, a good guy and will probably fit in. And then eventually I was shown into Vince's office. We spent, I'd say an hour and a half together, back and forth. But in the first 3-4 minutes, he said to me, tell me about your mustache. And I kind of looked at him like, I don't understand. You know, I mean, I wasn't trying to be a wise guy. I was like, what do you want me to tell you? I mean, he said he wanted to know when and why I first grew it, how long I had it, if I was overly attached to it. And, you know, during the discussion, you know, for the few minutes, I said, I get the feeling you are not big on mustaches. And he said, to tell you the truth, I hate facial hair. And he just looked at me. And I said, so I guess if where this is going, if everything worked out to both our satisfaction, would I shave the mustache? Yes, I would shave it. And that was it. Never said another word. We probably talked for, you know, at least over an hour. He wanted to know, you know, what I was making with Vern. I told him, and and he said, boy, he really is a cheap expletive. And I kind of laughed, and Vince said, you know, I appreciate you. He said, I knew what you were getting. And he said, I appreciate the fact you were honest about it. That tells me something. We talked a little more, and then Vince said, well, let me ask you this. If I would double your salary, when would you be available? And I kind of looked at my watch. I remember I said, well, it's 3:25. We can round it up to 3:30. And he laughed. He didn't say a word, looked at me for maybe 30 to 45 seconds, opened his top desk drawer, pulled out a razor, a can of shaving cream, and said, bathroom, right through that door. So that's all true, and I shaved it right there.
That is great. That is absolutely great. I can picture the whole thing.
When I walked out, Vince looked at me and he said, you really showed me something. I said, what's that? I said, my bare lip? He said, no. You back up what you say. You'll start Saturday in Detroit. And that's how it all went down.
That's incredible, and it's a good segue to my next question. So, you know, speaking of Detroit, that's exactly where I was going. Technically, Pontiac, Michigan. You know, it's a WrestleMania everybody still talks about today. You know, I don't even know what it is now. 33 years later, people are still talking about WrestleMania 3. What kind of pride did it give you going from the AWA to the WWF, knowing that you were now working for a company that was able to fill up a 93,000 seat arena?
You know, I mean, it was huge. Not only me personally, but what Vince had been able to do for pro wrestling. I mean, he took it mainstream. It became the in thing to do. But right from the, my first few days, they were just so organized with, pre-production meetings where they would dot every I and cross every T. And the fact that, Vince knew and communicated and built storylines that probably 9 months before, WrestleMania 3 at the Silverdome, he knew what the matches were going to be. He started just showing little hints, building, the Hulk Andre feud, building the Macho Man and Ricky the Dragon. It was so organized and focused, was the big difference. And, again, certainly, what it did, for the business. I mean, if you think about it, if you had gone even to any of the wrestlers themselves, in 78, 79, even 82, 83, and said, in a few years, you guys are going to draw 93,000 people, they would have thought you should be committed, that you were certifiable, you'd lost your mind. But, there it was.
That's incredible. What were, who were some of the stars in the WWF that you got to work with that you didn't actually cross paths with in the AWA? Because, again, there was a lot of big names in the WWF, Jesse the Body Ventura, Hulk Hogan, Iron Sheik, Andre the Giant, on and on down the line. But, that had worked for AWA and then WWF. But there was definitely some, I don't want to say new talents, but definitely people that you're probably seeing for the first time. Who really stuck out to you with the WWF that you didn't have before?
Well, certainly, the Macho Man Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth, even though he had been here before, but I had never crossed paths with him. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, Rowdy Roddy Piper, George the Animal Steel. I mean, these were, just huge names. I remember the first day I started doing interviews, and I'm looking around the guys just sitting in the interview room, kind of going, "You got to be kidding me!"
Just amazing. Was there ever a time around Macho Man that you kind of felt nervous around him because he was so intense, especially with Elizabeth in the room, that you just didn't want to, I don't know, maybe like look at her for more than a split second? Like, was it really that? Was he really that intense all the time?
Pretty much, yes. Not so much, in the interviews, because if you think about it, she didn't even come on for a lot of the interviews. It was usually just Randy. So most times she wasn't even in the interview room. And it was like anything, as I guess I would say far more, as Randy got comfortable with me, he would kind of involve me a little bit more. I mean, Randy was such a good talker that, with guys like Randy and Roddy Piper, I would start the interview, plug whatever city matches, things like that, bring them in, and pretty much let them go. I never, following Gene when he was taking time off, I mean, his timing and some of his, comedic facial expressions and things, at times would sometimes upstage the talent, not meaning to do so, but he was just that good. So I was always really cognizant of never trying to upstage or draw attention away from some of the big stars during the interview. And I'll admit, Vince, sometimes to the detriment that I probably should have had, in some instances, more of a reaction, but I was just very cognizant of not drawing attention away. But, Randy, as he got more comfortable, when he was going, he would sometimes look at me and just pose a rhetorical question, just, kind of his way of acknowledging, hey, you're here with me. But although one time I had been in a town and was had to commute, change planes in Omaha from where I was to the next town. So I landed and went to, the next gate, just sitting in the gate area, and I look over, and there's Elizabeth standing there. And, I think Randy had either gone to get something or gone to the men's room or whatever. But, this was somebody I knew. I didn't happen to see, anybody else, from WWF. So I just went over, Liz, hi, how are you? And we started, just talking for a couple minutes. And all of a sudden, Randy comes over and, almost went ballistic because I was just standing there talking to Liz, and I finally said, Randy, it's me. She was the only person in the gate area I knew. And then he kind of backed off or calmed down a little. But yeah, he was, certainly overly protective, I guess you could say.
No, I understand. So looking towards that too, a couple more questions for you, and thank you again for taking the time to talk with us today. Want to throw this out here too. So during that stretch, eventually Vince McMahon decides to take the belt off of Hulk Hogan and transition it into a tournament that, again, Randy Savage wins. Ironically enough, the guy we're just talking about. Was that a surprise to a lot of people to take the belt off of Hogan like they did, or was it just something that, the general course of wrestling time, someone else has to wear it for a little while?
The truth is, I don't know. I wasn't that much on the inside, but I'm guessing it came as a surprise to a lot of people. But I think it could have been. Vince was just so good at planning, and the people around him. It may have come down to simply that sometimes you can make more money with somebody chasing the belt than having the belt. I think it could have been as simple as that, or maybe, it has proved to be the case with a lot of people down the line. Vince may also have, been worried that Hulk was getting so big that he might be getting too big in terms of the power he might have. So it could have been, either one of those reasons, but that's, Vince, just completely my supposition. I don't know the answer to that one.
2 more questions left here, and I appreciate the time. So 2 of my favorite things coming up.
At some point we are going to talk about the fact that your idol Jim Thome hit his 400th Major League home run in a Twins uniform, right?
I knew you were going to throw it in there. And I got to look back on it.
You had really set the table for that one, and I thought, well, I'll just wait till it's time for that course.
And I think I got to go back and look because I don't know if he went to the Twins in 2005 or not. I'm not sure if he did. He might have waited a year, but I'm not the Twins, the White Sox, when they won the World Series in 2005. I'll tell you what, though, it sucks. See, being from Cleveland, we just got so used to people leaving. As sad as that sounds, especially in baseball, it started with Albert Bell in 96, then Manny Ramirez in 2000, Thome in 2002. We just got so conditioned to our heroes leaving that it just, you either had a chance afterwards to say, okay, we're going to be bitter towards this person or we're going to cheer for him. And when Albert Bell left, I was mad. When Manny Ramirez left, I was mad. And I didn't root for him. But I loved Jim Thome so much that when he left, I was like, you know what, I'm going to root for this guy wherever he goes.
You a big baseball fan?
Huge.
You used to come to my house to watch Monday Night Raw and Monday Nitro?
Who?
Kirby Puckett.
Oh, wow. One of my all-time favorites.
His father-in-law was a good friend of mine. Kirby loved wrestling, and he would come over so he could ask me, and then I'd kind of tell him what was really going on.
That's incredible. Let me tell you something, too. Kirby Puckett, when I was a kid, I'm 38 years old, so I'm not, like, super old, but I'm 38. So he was a big deal when I was a kid, okay? And his batting stance was one of the most pure batting stances that there was, and my dad taught me how to swing a bat like Kirby Puckett. We would watch Kirby Puckett swing, and I would mold my swing after him. He was one of those guys that you looked at him, Kirby Puckett, and you didn't think like, oh, he's this great athlete, but then you watched him play, and you're like, man, this guy plays out of his mind for how he was built.
Yeah, he short, and well, when he first came up, he was just short, but he was pretty muscular. And as his career progressed, he became kind of short and stocky, but his talent, never diminished. I mean, all anybody has to do is take a look at game 6 of '87, and not the home run, but before that catch he made. That if he doesn't get elevated and catch it up in front of the plexiglass, there would not have been a game 7.
No.
So, yeah, he was an amazing athlete.
Yeah, I agree. I'm glad you brought him up. Yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. I grew up in such a great generation, Ken. I look at the football players, and we'll get back to wrestling here in a split second, but I look at the football players I grew up with: Dan Marino, John Elway, Joe Montana, Jerry Rice, Emmitt Smith, Barry Sanders. Just a whole lot of them. Just amazing. Baseball, same thing. Roger Clemens, Ken Griffey Jr., Mark McGuire, Barry Bonds, Randy Johnson, just all of them. And it's like, I don't know. I mean, I still watch sports today like I did when I was a kid, but just that generation was just so good to me. I can, just blessed to grow up during that time, let alone basketball with Jordan and Bird and Thomas and everybody else. Just simply amazing. But speaking of which, so you grew up watching these legends, and whatever the sport is, whether it's pro wrestling, whether it's baseball, basketball, we all have our favorites. Well, there was this guy, and I'm probably going to butcher his name, but I want to say Paul Epperstein, I believe was his name, comes up with this concept called the American Wrestling Federation, and took all these legends from WWF and WCW and put them together, and they did like a round system for the matches. But to me, it was like the greatest thing, but it failed miserably. What were your memories of working with that, and why do you think it never really caught on?
My memories were great. In fact, somebody just a few weeks ago asked me of all the federations I worked with, which ones were the most fun that I just really enjoyed. And even though WWF was amazing, I mean, there were the travel and long days, would take a lot of the fun out of it. There were a lot of days that it was just really hard, long hours. But I've said when I did the LPWA and when I did the AWF were probably the most fun I had. I agree with you. I never understood the theory behind the round system. Knowing you're a wrestling fan, back in those days, the psychology that went into the moves and matches and would build to a crescendo of a false finish or the finish, and get the crowd really involved and invested into the match, and all of a sudden every 3 minutes you stop. It was like I never understood that. But I think the biggest reason was back then syndication in television. There weren't national cable deals floating. the syndication was just so expensive that, you know, Paul Alperstein and the partners he had just didn't have the financial wherewithal to sustain it. And, you know, having to buy TV time. You know, when the AWA was in its heyday, the majority of the shows were on a barter system where a television station would air your show and say there was, you know, 12 60-second commercial availabilities within the hour. The station would get 6 to sell, and you would get 6 to sell. So it kind of was, even though it was viewed as an infomercial to sell tickets for house shows, it was still a minor revenue source. And then when Vince went national, he started paying for his TV time. He was buying his time. So television stations were certainly, I mean, they were in the business to make money. It's like, okay, we were carrying the AWA on a barter, and now Vince is giving us this guarantee for the hour. So for Vern, AWF, you know, any of the other territories, what at one point was, if not a break even, but probably a minor revenue stream, now became a huge expense. And I think it was financially more than anything that caused the demise of the AWF and some of the other territories. I mean, you're right. AWF had great talent. Sergeant Slaughter and Tito Santana were the primary bookers. Talent, storylines, had pretty good production, but it just cost so much to be on the air in that time frame, still, you know, in the mid-90s, that it was just financially not sustainable.
Yeah, I mean, I remember all that. I remember loving it. I remember, you know, the one thing that stuck out was all the old WWF guys like Greg the Hammer Valentine, and like you said, Tito and Santana was the champion. You know, really the only thing I disagreed with, like you said, was the round system. And there was one time where Tito Santana lost the belt, and then from Cowboy Bob Orton Jr., and then in the same episode he won it back. And I thought that was kind of, I didn't really agree with that booking. You know, to me it seemed rushed and it made little sense. But really, besides that, like, you know, overall as a product, I really did enjoy it.
Maybe it was just a precursor to the 24/7 championship, which can somehow change hands 5 times in a 20-minute span.
I guess so. So, you know,
they were just way ahead of the game.
They might have been. I think Lord Alfred Hayes was on the announce team too. So yep. Definitely a cool thing. And Sheik Al9 Al Casey was part of that. I mean, they definitely had the names. They had the names to make it work.
Absolutely, and I think it. I don't know the reason, but like I remember in Orlando, it was doing a 2.5 rating. I mean, it was doing well in all the markets, but it just cost too much to keep it on the air.
So looking back at everything, including your time with American Gladiators on their live tour, what is your happiest memory of working in the business?
Oh, boy. It'd be hard to pin down, but I think it was probably, as I alluded to, that first day doing interviews with WWF, just looking at all the talent in that room, and you know, looking down at my sport coat with a WWF logo on it, thinking to myself, and I'm part of this? You got to be kidding me! So that you know, probably would be the one, because back then and even today, I mean, WWF, WWE is still the pinnacle I mean, that's the top of the mountain.
One last bonus question for you, just because you answered all these great, and you're a fellow baseball fan, so thank you for talking a little baseball there too. But one last bonus question, and you are one of the few people, and I mean few people that we've ever had on our show who's qualified to answer this. Who do you think today is probably the best second generation or even third generation wrestler currently competing? You got guys like, Randy Orton, he's a third generation. Natty Neidhart, the daughter of Jim Neville. Who are some of the best? And I say this because you saw their parents perform, their fathers, and now you're seeing the children. Who are some of the very best?
Really wanting to make me feel old, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was funny. And in March, actually the weekend before the pandemic reared its ugly head, I was doing a signing for Team Art Promotions. I was at the big event in New York, and had a chance to spend time with Bob Orton, and we talked about his career and talked about Randy's. On seeing everything, I would probably pick Randy Orton. I mean, he's old school enough where you can see in a lot of his matches, he's still trying to use psychology. Even in some of the high risk, he doesn't overly telegraph it ahead of time. He's got the look. His promos are good. So I guess I would probably go with Randy Orton if I had to pick one. But certainly in the Divas division, Natalya. I mean, she certainly is following in the Anvil's footsteps. I mean, she just keeps, coming and coming and coming. So, she's great as well. And I mean, it's funny sometimes if you catch her profile, to me, having worked with Jim so much, she looks a lot like her dad. So those are the two that you mentioned, but I guess I would have to say Randy.
And it's interesting to me too. Not only are those two great, but I look at it, and a lot of people don't even realize this, but Bray Wyatt, I mean, he's the son of Mike Rotunda, who two totally different kinds of wrestlers. They're performers with the way Mike Rotunda was, and now the character of Bray Wyatt. It's just amazing. And like I said, because I'm old enough to remember it, I'm not going to lie. So I'm old enough to remember watching them as fans as a kid, and now covering them as an adult, as a journalist, and seeing, the father-son or the father-daughter. It really is special. So I just wanted to let you, finish out the interview here. Is there any, people you want to say hello to, or any shout-outs, or anything at all that you wanted to plug, any upcoming appearances before we call it a wrap today?
Unfortunately, like everyone else, I was going to be at the Lou Thez Hall of Fame induction in Iowa in July. That was canceled. I was going to be at the gathering in August this year back in Charlotte, North Carolina. That was canceled, so no upcoming appearances. If you don't mind, I can hit some of your competition in that on Wednesday nights live at 8:30 Central, 9:30 Eastern. I've been co-hosting a podcast with Bruce Wirt on Vach Nation. So, that's been fun, keeping me a little bit more engaged. And there's if you go to ProWrestlingTees.com and search Killer Ken, they came up with a great Killer Ken T-shirt that I really like, because they included Vince a lot of the old territories we talked about, WWF, AWA, AWF, LPWA is all mentioned on that shirt, which has been selling, pretty well through the Vox Nation page on Pro Wrestling Tees. So that, and make sure everyone, keeps listening in to Key on Sports.
That's awesome. Thank you, sir. And I'll talk to you again. And next time I'll probably call you and we'll talk some baseball once it's up and running. Sound good?
Absolutely, Vince. Anytime.
All right. Thanks, Ken. You have a great day.
You too.
Bye now. So that was Ken Resnick, AWA legend. Absolutely just incredible, to say the least. So, with that being said, and clearly WWF legend, and it was great to talk AWF as well, to be honest with you. I love the AWF. So that was fun. Guys, have any ideas for the show? Let us know. Email me, coachvin14@yahoo.com. Everybody, stay safe. We're going to get through this together. It's almost over, I promised. Maybe. We'll see. Have a great day.